And to week 4, day 15 with our Eagles camp recap. With NFL insider John McMullen, co-host of Birds 365, and of course, our camp report here across Football 24/7. No fan practice tonight because of Hurricane Henri and the storms that carried through the Delaware Valley. But the Eagles practice tonight, and we'll get a quick update from John McMullen about how that all played out. Will the practice for the fans be rescheduled or any of that?
No, the practice is not going to be rescheduled for the fans. So obviously a little disappointment from that aspect. This is actually the last practice open in its entirety to the media. We go into regular season mode after Friday night's game against the New York Jets. And that's where we get to see about 20 minutes of practice each day. And that's it. So from that perspective, obviously, only 2 open practices this year scheduled. One of them canceled, and it never rains, by the way. So I think there's going to be some rain a little bit later. So maybe if you look at the radar, and I haven't looked at it recently, obviously the practice was scheduled at 7 o'clock. The Eagles moved it up to 5 o'clock in their practice bubble at the NovaCare complex. Again, did not rain at all, but maybe the fields were a little bit mucked up from the rain before. But yeah, fans are out of luck. There is no more open practices, no reschedule. This is it.
John, if I use my quick math and a quick calculation on this being the last practice, the end of week 4, day 15, at a 70-minute average, I'm coming up with 43.75 hours of work during this entire first training camp under head coach Nick Sirianni. It's not scientific, obviously. You have to factor in there a couple of walkthroughs, a couple of preseason games, but that's the extent or the body of work. What do the experts think? You say what about where this team is wrapping up today?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they practice enough. I've been pretty honest about that. Now, I do want to say not every practice is 70 minutes. That's sort of the low end. They went 90 minutes for entry, as an example today. So it's generally been anywhere between 70 and 90 minutes. They went over 2 hours once when the Patriots were here for the first day. So it's a little bit more than that. And they have walkthroughs basically all the time. So even when they practice, say for 70, 75 minutes, they're going to have a walkthrough later that day. So there's sort of 2 practices, but only one with a whole lot of energy. And obviously you're trying to, more of a mental aspect, get things down from that standpoint when you're talking about walkthroughs. So it's much more than that, than what you just said, Joe. But when you compare it to other teams around this league, and again, I obviously I don't have the ability to be in all 32 places, but if there's a team that practices less than the Philadelphia Eagles, I'd like to see them. I will say that.
First gathering tonight, then, John, for the team since the game on Thursday night. Now, there's a lot of ground to cover. There's injuries to talk about. There's the Jalen Hurts conversation. Are we any step closer to closure on that? There's the return to the field of Devonta Smith. A lot of that was talked about in the post game. But this is the first time that everybody has gathered in a practice setting since what was an ugly loss, even though it's preseason, an ugly loss on Thursday night.
Yeah, and I think Nick Sirianni knows that. He admitted there wasn't a lot good when you look at the film, even understanding the preseason mentality, no game planning, just basic vanilla stuff. You have to realize the other team's doing that as well. I mean, they're not game planning, they're just running vanilla stuff. So, in a lot of ways, it comes down to just execution. Players mano a mano doing things better, and obviously 35-0 tells you all you need to know about how that went for the Eagles. So uh, I think he was a little bit disappointed. I know he was a little bit disappointed. As far as Jalen Hurts goes, he was back at practice, seemed to be 100%. So I mean, the Eagles are out of the woods there. So I know there was some concern. Obviously, originally you got to rule out COVID-19. They did that night. They also were worried about appendicitis. I was told nothing like that. So it really just was a stomach bug, and he was back and uh, should be fine moving forward. Devonta Smith went down again at practice, so that was a scary moment. Looked like an ankle in a 7-on-7 drill. He was able to come back and finish the practice and get back into team drills. Although he didn't do a lot, they did throw him the football once after the injury. It was a quick sort of hitch pattern for about a 6-yard gain. Um, and we're going to have to check the injury report when it comes out for Tuesday and Wednesday. That's when the joint practices with the Eagles and New York Jets start. Uh, and those will be up in North Jersey at Florham Park, the Jets facility. Um, so, I mean, we've talked about Devonta Smith going back to the draft, and you have these sort of people say, and I'm one of them, you can't legislate injuries, but then you start talking about a 166-pound guy playing NFL football. And, I've heard it from Jody, for instance. Jody Mack, he'll say, look, he never got hurt in the SEC. Well, the SEC is good, but it's not the NFL. And here we are in 15 training camp practices, as you mentioned, Joe. 2 injuries. Make of it what you will.
And the season's not even underway. I think he took 6 or 7 snap. Did he play 6 or 7 plays in the game on Thursday night, John?
Oh no, Devontae played basically the whole first half, so he played a significant amount, and he got out of there relatively unscathed. Uh, but here we are again, first practice after the game, and he goes down at least a little bit. Had to be looked at by the training staff, and we'll see. And way too early to tell, but um, I was told the Eagles are going to, rely on the joint practices more than the third preseason game. So we'll see how they handle playing time for all the starters. But I think it's going to be a lot like you've seen, and they're trying to keep everything under wraps.
The one question there, the one follow up from Thursday night that I did want to get an update from you on is the latest on Jason Kroom carted off the field on Thursday night. What's the latest on Kroom?
Yeah, he's on injured reserve. He's out for the season. Tore the right patellar tendon in his knee and his leg. So he's done for the season. Unfortunately, had to be carted off. It was pretty evident early on that was going to be a really significant injury. Um, and yeah, he's done for the season. So it's never good. The Eagles are pretty deep at tight end as long as Zach Ertz is here. So I don't think Jason was going to make the team. Anyway, you hate to pile on, but that's just the reality of the situation. But yeah, he suffered a significant injury, and he will be out for the entire season, unfortunately.
You mentioned Zach Ertz. We get closer and closer and closer to the September 12th kickoff in Atlanta. And Zach Ertz is still with us. He's still there. Will he still be there when we get to the 12th of September?
Yeah, I mean, and unless, the Sam Bradford type situation we always bring up pops up somewhere around the league at tight end. And, if you go back to when the Eagles traded Sam Bradford, it was 11 days before the start of the regular season. When Minnesota's quarterback went down, they felt they were a contender. So they were willing to sort of overpay for Sam Bradford to get a competent option. Um, Zach Ertz is in a similar situation, just at tight end. So if somebody suffers an injury and they think they're a contender, and they need a tight end, Howie Roseman would be willing to listen. Otherwise, Zach Ertz is going to be here. And if he's going to be here, he's going to play. And I think, as I've stated pretty consistently, Nick Sirianni is coming to the same conclusion that Doug Peterson would come to basically every year and say, my receivers just aren't good enough. So if I have Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz, I got to play him.
I know you mentioned, looking back at the 2-day or at the practice with the Patriots, a Bill Belichick gesture to Zach Ertz, and it may have been just in fun. Dan Sileo, host of the National Football Show across the JAKIB Media YouTube channel, Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m., did push out on Twitter this weekend that there is conversation happening with the Patriots and the Eagles for Zach Ertz. That's what he's putting out there. That's perhaps what he hears. I'm not saying that's true or not, but at this point you're saying you have not heard any of that and you don't expect any of that, at least today or tomorrow, to turn into something.
No, because the Patriots spent a lot of money on two tight ends in free agency. And in fact, they spent over $10 million on two different tight ends. So they're a team that if one of those guys gets injured, Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith significantly injured because they've been banged up, but they're supposed to be back relatively quickly. If one of those guys went down for a significant period, like a Jason Kroom injury, and they were done for the season, then I think the Patriots would revisit it because they want to play a lot of 12 personnel. They want to play two tight ends, as they've had so much success in the past. If you go back to Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez, before the latter went off the rails from a personal perspective, no team has been better at using two tight ends than the Patriots. However, they already have two tight ends, and they're paying a ton of money for those two tight ends. And you can't pay a ton of money for three tight ends unless one of the other ones gets hurt.
Football 24/7 with John McMullen. End of week 4, day 15 across the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. If I missed it, John, when you were talking about Jalen Hurts earlier in the broadcast tonight, do you, as an expert, expect Jalen to get any snaps in the game against the Jets?
I was told he's not going to play, but this is before the game against the Patriots, where we're supposed to play about 2 series, give or take, same as week 1. So obviously he didn't get to play, and they were hopeful of getting him. If you think about 2 drives, he had 2 drives against Pittsburgh and ended up being 10 snaps. You would hope there would be a little bit more of a lengthy kind of drive, and maybe you can get that up to 20 or something of that nature. Never happened because he got ill. So that might change the Eagles' thinking and say, we got to get this kid some live reps in the preseason. But I got to tell you, if I were a betting man, I would go in the other direction because I don't think the Eagles want him to play behind a makeshift offensive line. Uh, they're not going to play Lane Johnson and Brandon Brooks and Jason Kelsey just to get Jalen Hurts some snaps. So I think Nick Sirianni's been pretty consistent that he's going to rely on the joint practices and get the work in that way. But again, it's always, they might meet and say, okay, he didn't play in week 2 like he was scheduled, so we got to get him some snaps. But that's sort of a domino effect. And if he's playing, you got to play other people. So ultimately, as I said, if you're a betting man, I would go in the opposite direction.
John, when does it become real for this team? I'm kind of trying to process what you're saying, and I'm sitting here saying to myself, well, wait a minute. It's a first year head coach. It's a first year coaching staff across the board. It's Jalen Hurts starting at quarterback. Even though he hasn't been officially named the starter, he's the starter. Their practices through 4 weeks have not been great from an offensive standpoint. Oh, by the way, it gets real in a couple of weeks. Like, it sounds to me like the Friday game against the Jets is a throwaway, with the exception of the few players trying to get off the bubble and make the 53-man roster.
Yeah, ultimately, I think it is going to be that. Look, this is an organizational decision. This is comes from above Nick Sirianni, the way they've handled uh, training camp in the preseason. They made the conscious decision, and Brandon Graham mentioned this today as well, to get uh, the key players as healthy as possible for week 1 of the regular season. That was the goal. I think if it were up to Nick Sirianni, they would have prepared more. They would prepare more as we get closer to the season. They would practice more. He would play more people, but it's not up to him. As a rookie head coach, sometimes you got to play the cards you're dealt. And the cards he's dealt here are saying, nope, you're not allowed to play so-and-so because we want them for week 1 as healthy as possible. So it's kind of a disconnect from that perspective. Um, and I'm writing about this for Philly Voice tomorrow as well. And the fact that, you know, come week 1, things will align again and everybody will be on the same page. But until you get to week 1, the front office has a different viewpoint than the head coach. But the front office obviously makes the final decision.
I want to ask you about Nick Sirianni's 5 values, John. I saw you pushed them out on Twitter today. Do those 5 values make sense?
Well, it makes sense. I mean, he always says number 1 is connect with people. Then it's competitiveness, which we always thought he's been preaching that from day 1, from the
Which,
day
by the
you
way, I don't know
arrived.
how. Which, by the way, just again, I don't consider myself an expert, but just an opinion. I'm not really seeing that. I'm not seeing that much competitiveness, with the exception of with the exception of Dillard and Mailata battling it out in the very beginning of practice. Where is the competitiveness? At what positions and how is it taking place? I haven't seen any of it.
Well, I think, and again, this is what I'm writing in Philly Voice about, so everyone should check that out tomorrow morning. But yeah, I mean, there's a disconnect. You know, you 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 preach competitiveness, and the minutes uh, it shows up in the form of a preseason game, you beg off. So there is kind of a 180. And, from the perspective of a guy trying to place his values, as he likes to call them, into the organization, into the culture, look, he's got to get over that hump. And it's a bit hypocritical. But I do think the players realize it's out of his hand. I think the fans don't care. Um, so ultimately, if they play well in week one, it won't matter. But if they come out and lay an egg, it's going to matter. Um, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard to preach competitive competition, and then show up and don't compete in the preseason. I said 52-0, Joe. 52-0 in the last 6 quarters of preseason football. It took them 88 minutes to convert a third down before they finally did in preseason football. Now, you have let's be honest, you have the Stepford fans who say it doesn't matter. But I can tell you this, if the Eagles had outscored the opponents 52-0, if the Eagles had gone 11 for 11 on third downs instead of 0 for 11, and I said it doesn't matter, they'd be saying the exact opposite. They would be making their reservations in Southern California for February. The more forward thinking might be talking about Nick Sirianni in Canton, Ohio. You get the point.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it only doesn't matter when you say it doesn't matter. And I don't care what you're playing. And Nick Sirianni was upset and a little less energetic today. 52-0 is 52-0 in 6 quarters. That's the last 6 quarters of the Philadelphia Eagles in the preseason. That's not good, no matter how you shake it. Doesn't matter, but it's not good.
Eagles camp recap with John McMullen. It's the end of week 4, day 15. The last practice today, as far as training camp is concerned here in South Philadelphia. The schedule for the upcoming week now, John, prior to the game on Friday, is what?
Monday's the travel day. The Eagles are going up there tomorrow. Tuesday and Wednesday are the joint practices with the New York Jets in Florham Park and their facility, similar to last week here with the Patriots, except the Eagles will be the visiting team. Thursday is the walkthrough before the game. Friday, final preseason game at MetLife Stadium against the New York Jets. And then we get into regular season mode and the preparation for week 1 in Atlanta heats up.
Looks like the Jets found themselves a quarterback. He's slinging the football. He's playing, and he's slinging the football. We shall.
Hey, Patrick Mahomes played.
Yeah.
Everybody's playing a little bit. Aaron Rodgers didn't play. There are certain guys. But, as I point out, Jalen Hurts started 4 games in his NFL career. He's taken 10 reps in the preseason. I don't know. That wouldn't be the way I would go about this.
Speaking of quarterbacks, for those of you keeping score at home, our good buddy Carson Wentz is scheduled to return to the practice field tomorrow. Good news, he's ahead of the curve in terms of his rehab and his return. What do you know about it?
Yeah, it's great news. He's going to be back in a limited fashion, and obviously, we're quite a bit away from week 1 because of the new NFL schedule. So, even after preseason ends after Friday, you have that long period until week 1 of the regular season where teams can ramp up and prepare. So they gave that big window for Carson Wentz. I think it was between 5 and 12 weeks. It's looking real good. It's only going to be 5. And that's obviously good for the Eagles because they want that third first-round pick, and they need Carson Wentz to play significant snaps to get it. And then you have the big-time insurance policy to get that third number one pick for next offseason if we have to start talking about quarterbacks again.
Got so lost in all the minutia and all the noise and everything else, I forgot to ask you uh, about practice, because I do have to get your practice training camp game ball selection before we disconnect tonight, John. What did you see inside the bubble in South Philadelphia? Where anything jump out? Anything jump off the field that was a great play? That was a terrific defensive stand. What did you see?
Yeah, I think Josiah Scott, who is the backup nickel corner to Avonte Maddox, sort of one of those bubble players. He had a big day, had an interception and a pass breakup on back-to-back plays during 7-on-7 drills. So he had a real positive day. And then Aaron Cepas, the punter, who I think, there was a lot of concern about him. And he's had, number one, he's had a very good training camp, very good preseason, looks like an NFL punter. The Eagles were working on downing the football inside the 5-10 yard line. And I got to tell you, Joe, he was phenomenal at putting these footballs exactly where you wanted them. Pretty amazing to see. And when we're in the bubble, we are really uptight, really close. It's a lot easier to get a feel for things. We can hear the coach's instruction. We can hear the coaches encouraging players, criticizing players, yelling at players. So it was really interesting. And Aaron Cepas had a big day, but I can't give the game ball to a punter, so I'm going to give it to Josiah Scott.
I was almost going to expect you to make that call, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, I can't do it. I'd like to do it, but I can't do it. And if I'm giving the game ball to a punter, that's not good news for the Eagles.
By the way, you may see that point. You may see him a lot in the 2021 season. Last question, John, before I let you retire for the night here on a Sunday. Again, it's our Eagles camp recap with John McMullen, day 15, across the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. John, you're a smart man. Tell me where this team is right now. The truth. Where is this football team?
I think they're better than they they have to be better than they looked in the preseason, but they really aren't playing anybody. They really aren't showing anything. Practice is a lot different. There's a lot more, for instance, Jalen Hurts running the football. That's going to be a big part of this offense. Zone reads, RPOs, and we saw it again today. These are not the types of things the Eagles are showing in the preseason. But, this offense has a lot of problems. The receivers haven't been good. The one who is good keeps getting hurt. The quarterback, as I mentioned, needs some experience. You need some reps. I think the offensive line is going to be fine. Miles Sanders keeps dropping the football. I think it's going to be ugly early in the season because the Eagles haven't prepared like they should prepare, because they made a cost-benefit analysis, and they feel getting to week one healthy is more important than extra preparation. So I can see both sides of the argument. I'm just one of those people who think you can't legislate injuries. So it might feel a little bit better when you lose someone in the regular season versus in the preseason, because at least the regular season game matters. But football's a contact sport. Football's a tough sport. Everybody deals with injuries. I'm old school. You got to prepare to win football games.
John McMullen with our Eagles camp recap. The end of week 4, day 15. One programming reminder. The Eagles season kicks off, of course, on September 12th. And so does the live post-game show with Derek Gunn, Mark Farzetta, Devin Caney, Lane Johnson, and John McMullen, right here across the YouTube channel, the JAKIB Media YouTube channel, and a big announcement coming next week regarding the live post-game show. Keep it here. Big news, John, coming to the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. We'll put that out next week as well. Great job by you again as the end of week 4, day 15 comes to a close. Thanks, Johnny Mac.
Hey, thank you, Krause. And that's 4 big names, and yeah, you get me as well.
We'll take you, brother. Listen, you're in the byline, brother. That's all that matters.
That's all that matters. All right, brother.
Good stuff. See you next time, everybody.